Even if it's not a song you wrote, it's still fun to go in there and see what you can do. In the world of country music, where legends rise and fade like the echo of a steel guitar, one name has always stood taller than the rest: George Strait. Man. For over 5 decades, he's been the cowboy every fan trusted. The quiet man who let his voice and songs tell the stories of heartbreak, love, and endurance. But now, in 2025, headlines are flashing across the nation, and the name George Strait is once again on every tongue. Not for a concert, not for an award, but for something much heavier. At 72 years old, the King of Country has broken his silence in a way that fans never expected. This latest revelation has left Nashville reeling, social media buzzing, and millions of loyal listeners wondering if this is the final chapter of a story that shaped modern country music. To understand why the latest revelation about George Strait is shaking the world, you have to look back at the man himself. Born George Harvey Strait on May 18, 1952 in Petite, Texas, his story could only have been written in the heart of the Lone Star State. He wasn't raised in Hollywood, nor was he groomed for fame. He grew up working on his family's cattle ranch, waking at sunrise to tend to chores, learning early that hard work and humility meant more than flashing lights or applause. A quiet boy, often shy, George didn't seek attention. But beneath that cowboy hat, even as a child, burned a fire for music. He started playing guitar in high school, not with dreams of stadiums, but as a way to ease his restless spirit. It was the 1960s, when rock and roll ruled. But George turned toward country, drawn to Merle Haggard, George Jones, and Bob Wills. Unlike others, he refused to bend with trends. Even as outlaw country rose and Nashville leaned pop, George Strait stayed faithful to the traditional sound. After enlisting in the U.S. Army and marrying his high school sweetheart Norma, it seemed George might settle into family life. But fate had other plans. While stationed in Hawaii, he joined the Army-sponsored band, Rambling Country. There he discovered that his voice, smooth, steady, and unmistakably Texan, wasn't just good. It was unforgettable. Back home, he finished college and played with his band Ace in the Hole. For years, Nashville slammed the door in his face, insisting traditional country was dead. But George refused to change. That stubbornness would one day crown him king. In 1981, his debut hit, Unwound, stormed the charts. From that moment, George Strait never looked back. Over 4 decades, he racked up more number ones than any artist in history, outpacing even Elvis Presley. Through it all, he stayed grounded, private, and scandal-free. That's why today's breaking headlines cut so deep, because George Strait never made noise without reason. Behind the glitter of success lay scars. On June 25, 1986, tragedy struck when his only daughter, Jennifer, just 13, died in a car accident. The loss shattered him. Friends said George changed overnight. Once open and approachable, he grew silent, retreating from interviews for years. His grief poured instead into music. Songs like Baby Blue and You'll Be There became tributes hidden in melody, prayers from a father's broken heart. Through it all, Norma became his anchor. While peers fell into scandal, George clung to family, faith, and the stage. Every performance became both escape and testimony. Fans saw confidence under the spotlight, but backstage, George often gripped the microphone tighter, fighting back tears as lyrics cut too close. Triumph and tragedy became inseparable. He broke records no one thought possible, yet always carried the empty seat where his daughter should have been. For decades, George seemed untouchable, but fame had a price. His relentless touring schedule left him exhausted. Some nights, he pushed himself just to step onto the stage. Rumors of health scares surfaced, whispers of heart strain and surgeries. He never confirmed them. Nashville insiders say he chose silence to protect his fans from seeing weakness. To them, he was the cowboy who never cracked. But age and grief weighed on him. Fighting to preserve traditional country against industry pressure, coping with loss, and enduring the weariness of the road, George carried far more than fans ever realized. Every time he sang, the question lingered: how long could he keep this up? And then, it happened. After decades of guarded silence, George Strait finally spoke. In a heartfelt statement that spread across TV, radio, and social media, he admitted what many had whispered. His time on stage was drawing to a close. Not just because of age, but because of ongoing health concerns. Years of touring, thousands of shows, endless strain. His body had limits. His voice, though strong, carried weariness. For the first time, George said he was listening to those limits. But there was more. George confessed that his silence after losing Jennifer wasn't just grief. It was guilt. He believed he should have done more to protect her. That admission, raw and heartbreaking, stunned fans. For the cowboy who never faltered, it was a revelation of humanity few expected. The reaction was immediate. In Texas, bars and dance halls filled with fans clutching records and tickets, weeping openly. At rodeos, his name was announced between events and crowds roared louder than for the bulls. On social media, hashtags like #GeorgeStraitForever trended worldwide. Families gathered in kitchens, blasting Amarillo by Morning in tribute. Truckers posted videos of radios playing his songs on lonely highways. Radio stations cleared playlists, spinning George Strait for hours. Tourists left flowers at the Country Music Hall of Fame. Across America, the cowboy's voice became a unifying presence. Part grief, part gratitude, part disbelief. Fans clung to hope. Was this truly goodbye, or could he give them one more song? When George Strait speaks, Nashville listens. Within hours, tributes poured in. Garth Brooks called him the North Star. Reba McEntire said George was her compass. Casey Musgraves credited him with keeping country tied to its roots. Even Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel weighed in, honoring George as a cultural icon beyond genre. Promoters recalled his unmatched discipline, recording albums in days, filling stadiums without gimmicks. Producers admitted they had known about his health struggles, but respected his silence. The industry realized this wasn't just a personal confession. It was the passing of an era. George Strait was more than a star. He was the last of a kind. George Strait's legacy can't be measured in numbers alone, but the statistics still tell a staggering story. With 60 #1 singles, more than any artist in history, and over 100 million albums sold, he carved out a place in music that no one has been able to match. His concerts filled stadiums across America, often outdrawing rock icons and pop superstars, proving that his quiet, traditional style of country still held a powerful grip on the public. Yet beyond the records and accolades, his true legacy is far more personal. His songs became the soundtrack to everyday life. Brides walked down the aisle to "I Cross My Heart." Soldiers clung to "Love Without End, Amen" in distant war zones, and families danced at barbecues to "The Chair." George Strait's music has always been more than just melodies and lyrics. It has been a living part of America's heartbeat, passed down from generation to generation, stitched into weddings, funerals, road trips, and quiet nights on porches. His songs aren't just remembered, they are lived. Now that George has broken his silence, speculation runs wild. Fans and industry insiders alike wonder whether this is the end of his journey on stage or simply the beginning of a new chapter. Some whisper of a farewell tour, imagining sold-out stadiums under the Texas sky, where he might give his audience one final embrace through song. Others hope for a memoir, a chance for the famously private cowboy to finally share the untold stories behind the music. There are rumors of one last album, a project that might capture the weight of his revelations and serve as his ultimate message to the world. And yet, just as possible is the vision of George retreating quietly to his ranch, trading microphones for cattle gates, content to let his songs ride on without him. The truth is, George Strait has never played by Nashville's rules. He has always written his own script, and that's why even now, No one can say for certain whether this is a farewell, a transformation, or perhaps something else entirely. As the headlines settle and the world absorbs his words, one truth becomes clear. Legends don't fade, they transform. George Strait's revelation doesn't tarnish his image or weaken his legacy. Instead, it deepens it. For decades, he was the king of country, seemingly untouchable, a symbol of steadiness in an industry defined by change. Now, by revealing his struggles and his humanity, he has shown that even kings carry burdens. That honesty only makes him greater. If this truly is his farewell, it is not the end. His voice will continue to echo in jukeboxes, wedding halls, roadside diners, and wide-open highways for generations to come. The cowboy may one day ride into the sunset, but his shadow stretches endlessly across the horizon of country music. And as fans replay his songs, the question will linger, soft as a Texas wind and just as haunting. Was this truly goodbye? Or does George Strait still have one last song left to sing? The story of George Strait is not just about the man himself, but about the way he brought people together. In a world divided by noise and change, his music was always a steady hand, a familiar voice guiding fans through love, heartbreak, and hope. Even now, as uncertainty surrounds his future, that constancy remains. Every time a song of his drifts through a speaker, whether in a Texas honky-tonk or a distant diner, it reminds listeners that some things never truly leave us. They simply live on in the echoes of memory and melody. And maybe that is George Strait's greatest gift, his ability to be both timeless and present. Whether he steps back or surprises the world again, the bond he forged with his audience will not break. It will only deepen. Long after the headlines fade, people will still hum his words under their breath, still sway to his melodies on porches and dance floors. Because legends like George Strait don't just belong to their time, they belong to all time. And as long as country music exists, so too will the voice of the king.